My name is Clint Sestrich. I'm a fisheries biologist with the U.S. Forest Service stationed in Livingston, Montana, and I work with the Custer-Gallatin National Forest. Today I'm here on the bridge of Foothills Fire to talk with you a little bit about what a fisheries biologist does that most people think would be a little bit unconventional for someone that works with fish for a living. Forest Service fisheries biologists are involved in fire in two capacities. One is called resource advising, and the other is BEAR, or Burned Area Emergency Response. In the resource advising world, our job is to make sure that the fire suppression activities, such as dropping fire retardant, digging line, making line with dozers, or even applying water, doesn't have a long-term impact to the resource. So we work with fire folks directly to make sure that line is in a place where it'll be effective but have minimal impact on aquatic resources. We also make sure that we work with folks to repair that line that's put in to prevent the spread of the fire. And we also do things like making sure that water drafting equipment that's used to suck up water to go into engines or tenders to put on the fire, to make sure that drafting equipment isn't spreading aquatic invasive species from one water body to another. These fire engines and tenders, they come from all over the country, so there's a very high potential to spread aquatic invasive species. So we make sure that when they come onto a fire that we decontaminate them, and when they leave the fire that they're decontaminated. And we also work with aircraft to make sure that helicopter buckets aren't spreading aquatic invasive species. If they dip out of a lake with species such as a zebra mussel, they could spread that invasive species to another lake if they dip out of it without cleaning in between. So there's a variety of things that we do in the resource advising capacity. When National Forest employees work on BEAR, or Burned Area Emergency Response, they typically work together as a team comprised of a fisheries biologist, a hydrologist, and a soil scientist. We're looking to help minimize the effects of post-fire runoff, meaning when we have rain events on top of burned areas like this, which can often have hydrophobic soil, or soil that actually repels water. When this happens, water just runs right off, it picks up steam, and it can actually cause landslides and debris flows, which really are pretty devastating to people that have homes downslope or downstream of these burned areas. And initially, what they do is a quick assessment of the burned area to figure out what the overall burn severity is and the overall likelihood of post-fire runoff events with post-fire storms in the first year or two after the fire. And the way they start that is with what's called a bark map, Burn Area Reflectance Classification. And that's a map that's developed by a satellite, and it looks at reflectance on the ground from before the fire versus after the fire. So they're looking at that change, and that's a good way to get an initial picture of what the burned area looks like. And then the soil scientist goes out and actually looks at the ground to see if the soil characteristics actually are lining up with what the bark map shows. And so they take a look at the soil and they'll classify it as being low severity, moderate severity, or high severity.
Slugs. They can't even dig holes anymore.
Well, I gave you a fiberglass shovel.
All right, so on the surface here, we've still got intact needle cast, or partially intact needle cast, obviously desiccating pine cones here. But we're in a place where we wouldn't normally have a really thick or duff or organic layer anyway. So as we look at what the fire's done here, like I already said, with this intact needle cast, to suggest that the heat that hit the soil surface really wasn't all that dramatic and happened for all that long. The fire we know was moving pretty fast. So the soil beds are intact. You can see really fine roots right there just below the soil surface that are completely intact, are still friable. They aren't snapping even when I touch them. So that also suggests, limited soil heating, both in magnitude and duration. See if we have any hydrophobicity. A little bit standing right in there. I'm gonna drip it down a little bit further down here. And so it went right in, what we're talking like.
So just a little deeper down in the profile.
Right. No more than just a few centimeters down, we're seeing no hydrophobicity expression. There's kind of mixed signals here because of what we're seeing on the surface, and the soil structure with black ash also, that tends to be an indicator of a little less heating, a little less burn severity. But that water repellency is something we'll want to think about and see if we keep seeing more of. And if we do see more of it, it could change the way we think about doing the hydrology modeling.
So once the Bear team has determined what the potential is for runoff and how big of runoff in the post-fire environment, they really take a close look at the values at risk from this runoff. Meaning, are there homes downstream? Are there trails that could get washed away, or roads that could get washed away? Maybe there's undersized culverts that aren't big enough to pass the flood flows that are likely to come with the big runoff event over burned areas. And so what that means is the Bear teams will come up with treatments to address those concerns from runoff to valuable infrastructure. So some of the things that they might do are upsize culverts that are too small. They'll replace them with bigger culverts or even bridges, which can pass these big flood flows. And that allows people to move in and out on these roads safely, even if there's a flood. And then also, they can sometimes recommend hill slope treatments, such as seeding the hill slope or placing logs on contour to reduce the runoff and the erosion on slopes. It's very expensive, and typically we're not able to treat entire drainages, but if there's a very specific concern downslope, we can do a treatment there in hopes that we can protect it. And really, the effectiveness of these treatments depends on how steep of a hillside it is and what type of soil that we have, as well as what the severity is. So there's a variety of things that dictate how effective these treatments will be. I very much enjoy working as a fisheries biologist for the Forest Service because the work is very diverse. We do everything from native fish population restoration with partner agencies, to habitat restoration or enhancement in streams, to doing things like working on wildfires to minimize the effects of fire suppression, and then also working on those bear teams to reduce the post-fire runoff risk to life and property. So those things combined make a very exciting and interesting job that's always changing, and you're always learning more. My name is Clint Sestrich. I'm a fisheries biologist with the U.S. Forest Service. I live and work in Livingston, Montana, and just want to thank you for watching the Learn Where You Live series.